How's it going? This is Keanu Yamamoto, sitting here with Jackson Vaughan. He's the head softball coach for Linfield University. He has 894 wins, won 2 national championships, 19 conference championships, was the coach of the year for the Northwest Conference, I believe, 13 times, and is going into his 19th season as a defensive coordinator for Linfield football. Coach, thank you for hopping on. Tell us a little bit about your progression, your family, your background.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. It's always good to obviously see, you, obviously, but obviously former players in general. As you get older, is really truly one of the more enjoyable parts of the job as you get older. For me, I actually grew up on a cattle ranch out in Eastern Oregon. Most of my younger years. We moved out there when I was in fifth grade, out in the middle of nowhere. Nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, 10,000 acre cattle ranch. And that's kind of how I grew up. I had a big love for sports though, forever. Was a collect the football cards kid and was passionate about really all three sports: football, basketball, and baseball to some degree, but not as much probably baseball. But growing up on the ranch made it hard. Obviously, ended up going to a high school. We had 27 kids in the high school, so I had 6 kids in my class when I moved out there, and so it was 8-man football, and just the opportunities were a little bit limited. That didn't necessarily stifle my love for sports. I grew up obviously just religiously watching obviously NFL, and particularly that was the era of Jordan and the Bulls, and so watched them religiously growing up, and was a huge Jordan fan. And then finally my senior year, I moved back into Baker, which is not big, but at least it was 10,000 kids, and at that time a 4A high school, and just a chance to obviously play at a much higher level than what I was at with the 8-man stuff. Did well enough, had aspirations to play in college. Me and a buddy actually from Baker that was also kind of a 1-year transfer kid that was from Nevada decided to come to Linfield. We visited Linfield, Western Oregon, a couple schools over here. Kind of fell in love with Linfield when we visited compared to some of the other schools. And so him and I both came. Had some big aspirations. I think we both in some ways got humbled real quick when we got to Linfield. I think happens to a lot of kids. You're better than you think you are. I think it happens to kids that come to the small college a lot, where you just think you're going to a small college, you're going to step in and be a big fish because you were good in high school. Then you realize, man, there's a lot of really good football players even at the small college level. And so that was pretty humbling. And then I got injured and had to kind of decide what I wanted to do, and spent a year actually doing radio broadcasts. Was the color guy for Linfield football games, Linfield basketball games for a year. But really missed obviously just being around practice and stuff. So I came back and started to coach as a student assistant when I was a junior. And that kind of led to what I wanted to do. I was a pretty good student in high school, as a 4-point kid, so kind of felt obligated to maybe go make some money. So I was doing accounting and business and thought that was the route to go. Actually finished my 4 years in accounting and was getting ready to go get an accounting job. I did some job interviews in downtown Portland. Was going up to whatever the 12th floor of a building in a suit and tie, and it was coming back from one of those interviews. I just was sitting in the car and was like, this is really not me and what I wanted to do. Growing up on a cattle ranch, obviously you can't get much more extreme than being in downtown Portland in a suit and tie. And plus I was loving coaching. So I came back to Linfield for a 5th year, coached again, but got my teaching degree. I did student teaching at McMinnville High School here in town. Thought maybe that's what I'll go do. But fortunately, a job opened up here at Linfield that was close to full time. Didn't pay much, obviously, at that time, but took it and did football for a couple years, but it wasn't paying very well. And then they decided to help my job become more full time. Plus, the softball program needed help to have me help softball as well. Did softball as an assistant for, I think it was only 2 years. Head coach decided to step aside. Some of the players approached the AD and kind of asked if they would ask me to take it over. That was never in a million years on my radar to take over softball or to even coach softball, but did it. Kind of fell in love with the thing after I did it for a while, and obviously still love football, and have just been able to maintain both for the last 25 years. So you just kind of go from one thing to the next, and over the years I've obviously learned a ton, both in things to do and not to do in both sports. I think both sports in some ways help me to be a better coach, because I get to coach year round pretty much. Everybody has kind of their downtime, and I don't have downtime really, but I get to coach all the time. And for me, that's the fun part. Practices are the best part of my day every day. It doesn't matter. Like, you get to go out and, during football season, we're scripted, and
Unless you mess up the scout card.
unless you mess up the scout card, then that does frustrate me. I tell the scout kids, you just wasted 60 seconds of my life I'll never get back, because it took me at least 60 seconds to draw that card, and then I had to decide to run that play. Then I had to type it into the Excel spreadsheet for the day, and and you run the play wrong, that would be wasted. It's probably more than 60 seconds of my life I never get back.
Well, Coach, I mean, that's a hell of a trajectory there. How do you go about balancing softball, football, and being a father of three and doing it at a freaking high level?
I think the hardest thing, to be honest, is you're gonna you feel pretty crappy a lot of the time that you can't be great at all three at the same time. It's hard to do. So there's invariably times of the year you get frustrated, or I don't know if it's, you don't get depressed, but you just get frustrated that you're not being a good father at the time, or as good as you could be, or you're not being as good at a softball coach, because man, I'm so busy with football right now during football season. I even apologized to our softball team this fall. I was like, I've been a pretty lousy softball coach this fall. It was such a busy football year, and we were on the road quite a bit, and I didn't make many of our fall practices. But you have to kind of come to grips with that. If you're going to do a job like this, you can't do everything. So just every day you got to do the best you can at what's the most important things that day. And you certainly got to make priority for family, because I think, no matter what, that's what you have in the end. No matter how much we invest in sports and coaching, like if I stepped away from Linfield, tomorrow, they would be sad for like a week, and then they're going to move on and they're going to coach again, and there's going to be games played, and your family's obviously going to be with you for the rest of your life and are impacted. And especially with kids, you're making an impact on them every single day, whether you're present or not, and invested in them, and they're going to remember that. The kids that I coach are kids to me, but it's obviously not quite the same. My impact's going to have hopefully a lasting impact, but it's not like they kind of expect that once they separate from Linfield. Obviously they're not hearing from me every day like my kids expect to. It's a little different. So
There's a lot of stuff that people talk about work-life balance, and then you hear other coaches talk about work-life integration. And I'm looking back to when I was a player at Linfield, as well as kind of the younger days of coaching. You've always had Shelly and the girls kind of around practice. What's your approach with that?
um again, you just got to do the best you can. I think if you can involve the family in what you're doing, it sure makes things a lot easier, because like you said, then you become more integrated. It's not where you have to find necessarily separate time all the time. It's way easier to do, to be honest, when the kids are younger, because they don't have their own separate sports schedules and social schedules. So they can come and hang out at practice and have a great time. And just the fact, it's amazing that you're in the same space is comforting to them. It's comforting to me. Even though you're not necessarily hanging out, but it's time. And then you find breaks in between. You can play catch and you can do different things, and that's time that obviously you never get back. And so I think as much as you can do that's possible. My kids are at the age now, we're getting to those teenage years where now it's way tougher. They got social schedules, they got their own practice schedules, they're playing games, and so getting them around practice is much more difficult. But they still enjoy coming when they can make it. They still, more now as they gotten older, like enjoy coming and watching games, because they kind of appreciate obviously the game a little bit more. When you're 7, you don't really appreciate the game. You don't give a crap what's going on the field. And then I think how the players treat them. I think that was one really cool thing about coaching at Linfield, is you get such good kids, like the impact my players could have on them in terms of positive relationships, and particularly in softball, having all these really power positive female role models that my kids could see of, here's these young female athletes that are super nice, but man, they're kicking ass in school. They're working super hard. They're tough. All these things that you kind of hope my kids end up being. And they're around 30 of them when they come and show up at practice. And so, and we've had softball players babysit over the years, and do all those type of things. So there's all kinds of things that way where you're trying to, as you said, kind of integrate the two worlds together, the best you can.
I remember vividly as a freshman, I was a stupid kid. But anyways, I remember going out. This was in the fall. This was Halloween, and we walk out of our dorms, and we can see your office from the dorm I was at, because I was staying right in Jane Failing. And there you are, 10 o'clock, lights on. We go out. We come back. I think it's 12:30, 1 o'clock. Jackson Vaughan still in his office. Where does that drive come from?
I think a lot of people hopefully that want to be good at things, like listen, anybody that's like really good, like the hatred for losing or not doing your best just drives you. You know what I mean? Like, you always remember the losses and the times you underperformed better. And I think when you're, a D coordinator, for example, like, the kids are going to go play, but if you don't put together a good plan for them, you don't give them a chance. And so, it's my job. And we tell recruits this all the time. It's my job to make sure that we never lose a game. And you look back as a player and you're like, that was on the coaches. Like, we weren't prepared. We didn't run that play enough. We didn't have an answer to what they were doing schematically. We were put in bad positions too frequently by what the coaches were calling. Like, that's 100% on me. And so that's the obligation to have to our players, and our players have the obligation, obviously, to then hopefully study out the plan that we have, but they also have the heavy obligation to work their butts off, obviously, in the weight room and speed training and stuff, because I can't control that. I can put them in the right place, but if they're not fast enough, strong enough to make the plays that we need them to make, then that's on them. I mean, the technique part is back kind of a 50-50 or whatever relationship. We got to make sure they get the work on the technique and coached on the technique, but they also got to buy into that part and get good at the technique aspect. I think that part I take a lot of ownership. I think if we lose a game, it kills me even doing it for 25 years. I feel like I've been stabbed in the heart every time we lose a game. It eats at me no matter what. Fortunately, we don't lose a lot at Linfield. I look all the time, obviously, and my wife jokes if I end up in a different program and when things have been different, if you're losing, if you're going many programs, like it's a realistic expectation to go 500 every year, or you're restarting a program. And we've just been so lucky here. I jumped into a winning program, and we've had 69 consecutive winning seasons or whatever now in football. The expectation every year is that you're going to win the conference, and you're going to be 9 or 10 wins minimum, and with a loss or two. If you lose 2 games in a year at Linfield in football, it's a terrible year. Softball, now we've been fortunate to win. You lose more because there's more games, but still you're winning 80% of the games we play on average. So we've been pretty lucky to not continue to lose. I guess that would be frustrating, to say the least.
Why do you coach?
When I was younger, I think I did coach a lot just because of the competition aspect and trying to beat other people and win. And that's still certainly a motivating factor. But I think as you get older, you do it a lot more just because you get to see the impact you have on kids and the relationships that you develop with kids. And obviously coaching college kids, they're such a critical part, and every part's critical. High school is critical, obviously junior high is critical, like they're all critical. But as you get to college, you're making that big step away from home. You're now getting tested in your independence because you're away from mom and dad. You're really finding out and deciding who you are as a person. I think you're really trying to, we tell kids, like, you're laying the foundation for what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So some kids we come in are pretty set, and they'd probably be fine without us, but you certainly get a lot of kids that, like, they're kind of a hot mess when they come in. Maybe they didn't have the guidance. Maybe they're still immature, whatever. And you hope that, your impact on them, both in how you treat them, but also how you kind of run the program and how you develop, things like work ethic and responsibility and overcoming adversity and all the things that sports give them, that you make them better equipped to handle life. And then they're old enough where you can have some real adult relationships with kids in college because they're, old enough and appreciate it. I think that especially is true on the softball side. One big difference between coaching the two sports, I think the female athletes are a little bit more mature typically at that age. And a lot of the guys we get at 18, 19, they're still rather clueless and a little bit immature sometimes. But they make a big jump. It's amazing how much guys change from 18 to 22. They're way different when they leave Linfield, typically when they come in.
Can you talk a little bit about your coaching philosophy and if your approach to football is a little different than softball, and if it isn't, like kind of what the contrast is between your coaching philosophy with football, coaching philosophy with softball, or if they're the same?
I mean, the foundation is the same. I think that's why we've been good in both. When I took over softball, I really tried to take a lot of things that we were already doing in football and what I had learned in football and just applied it in a different way to softball. But I think, forever, right, when you jumped into football at Linfield, you kind of have the Ad Rutschman impact. And so, I didn't ever get to play for Rutsch. I never got to coach for Rutsch. But all the coaches I was coaching with all did. So they were all disciples of Rutsch and were such big believers in everything that Rutsch preached. And so that rubbed off on me in an indirect way. But I think working hard is a huge one. I think a big attention to detail and detail and everything, detail and technique, detail and scheme, and just really, really, I think, paying attention to those things. So that applies to both sports. I think, with me being the D coordinator, but still coaching the D line over the years, that's one thing that sticks with you, because D line is a position where everything happens so fast and immediate. You're judging guys all the time on, how big's your first step? What's the angle of your first step? Where's exactly your hand placement? And what's your stance like? Because you win or lose many times based on that, right, from the get-go, if your foundation isn't very good. So you're constantly harping on these little things, and then that trickles down to obviously every position to some degree, but certainly D-line play is one of the ones that you're heavy attention to that. And then that carries over into softball because you do the same thing with the swing, in hitting. That is where I take a lot of pride as a hitting coach. But your foundation and how you're getting ready in the box and what's your stance and load like, and what are you ending up in what we call your attack position before you actually swing the bat. if those things are bad, then you probably don't have much of a chance to probably have a good swing. And then from there, what's your timing like? Is the timing what's messing you up? Then obviously pitch selection is a big one, obviously in the sport of baseball, softball too. So you're evaluating those things, but just that daily grind and repetition. We don't do anything I think extremely fancy in either sport, but we do get really good at the fundamentals, and I think that's one thing that kind of has characterized our D-line play, and I think even what we do softball wise is we're really, really good at the basics, you know what I mean? And those are two things that do correlate pretty heavy. Like D-line play doesn't change a lot from week to week. Like you're striking guys and you're getting out blocks and you're, doing the same reads come up in general every week. And softball, you're going to show up every week and you're going to hit. Like the pitcher might change, but the fundamentals stay the same.
Who have been some of your greatest influences in the coaching profession or outside the coaching profession?
I mean, in football, all I've ever known is Linfield, to be honest. I mean, I never, as you know, never went anywhere else. Coaching two sports, I don't clinic much. I don't go to the national convention, never been once. And so I don't have a lot of outside resources except for, what you study. I mean, sometimes you study, but that's more from a schematic influence. So everything I've kind of gotten football-wise has been from directly, like I said, Coach Rutschman. Coach Losi obviously was the head coach here. Coach Langsdorff was head coach before that. He was the one that actually brought me in on staff. A guy named Wes Swan was our offensive line coach and coordinator from Hawaii, and he was the first guy I kind of worked with directly as a position coach. There's a guy named Bob Mewany that I coached with a couple years that had incredible attention to detail, that impact, and then obviously Coach Smith, who I've coached with now for 20-some years, really, dedicated, loyal to Linfield, and emulates a lot of things I do in terms of hard worker, but also he's coached I think almost every position at Linfield, so he's really has a great overall view of the game, and obviously is unbelievably loyal to Linfield, and so just him and I have had a great working relationship for the last 25 years, and I got to coach defense with him before I became the D coordinator. So most of the things I know on defense kind of stem from him and Losi, at least my foundation, and then obviously I've been able to figure out a few things on my own over the years. And then, softball wise, coaching with the coach that was the head coach when I started, Laura Kenow, obviously learned a lot just because she was the only thing I knew to begin with. And but then in softball it's different, I think, because you play the same opponents a lot, so you really do get to pick up more from the other coaches in terms of how they run their program, but also what they're doing schematically, and how everything from how they warm up. You're right there watching the team and all that sort of stuff. So there's a legendary coach from was St. Thomas. He's now at St. Mary's, John Cheetah. When we first started getting kind of good in 2002, 2003, played them a few times, and you're just kind of wowed at how organized they were and how hard his kids played, and just everything that they did. And so I learned a lot from him. PLU was unbelievably dominant when I started. There was a guy named Rick Noreen that really had that thing rolling, and they were national competitors, and how his kids hit and did certain things. I learned a lot from them, and that was kind of our goal when I took over, was to try to beat them, and finally did in, I think, '04. And so those are two. And then you kind of, again, studied a lot of the legends of the game in Division I and tried to pick stuff up from them. Guys like Mike Andrea and Sue Enquist were big at the time when I got into it at Arizona and UCLA. And so, so you just keep picking things, and you find drills, from coaches and all that sort of stuff. And so, all those people I think have an impact.
You mentioned the PLU coach and the St. Thomas coach. Is that something that you reached out to them, or is this just all in observation when competing against these teams?
No, it's all in observation for the most part. I mean, 100% observation, to be honest. I think. Yeah. I'm a big observer. I think me.
It doesn't help to send an email, or it doesn't hurt to send an email.
No, it doesn't. But that's probably one of my weaknesses. I don't know if it's a combination of prideful, but probably inherently I'm a little bit of an introvert growing up in the ranch and all that sort of stuff. I learn a lot by observing and studying and doing that sort of stuff. Video, obviously, in both sports is a huge teacher. I think sometimes you go talk to someone, you kind of get it, but I think it's even like you teach you how to play Rover. You know what I mean? You get a lot by seeing it on video and showing. I could tell you how to play Rover all I want, but seeing it for your own eyes and observing how it works, I think obviously sometimes is a better teacher in some ways.
I came across this quote this morning, and when you're talking about just a little bit in your introduction phase, you were talking about you get to coach year round, and the quote I came across was, if you want to succeed, the best thing you can do is double your failure rate. And here you are coaching year round. Can you kind of talk about at what point in your career, or even if you're not even there yet, damn, I'm pretty good at this. I feel comfortable with my operations. I feel comfortable with my process.
I don't know. I think the good thing about coaching is like you're gonna think you're pretty good, and then you go get your butt kicked by somebody, and you get reset real fast all the time. You know what I mean? And I think you also just get reminded real fast, like you're only as good as the kids you got to some degree. You know what I mean? So we won in softball in 10, 11, 12. We went to the World Series 3 years in a row, and we went second, first, and second. And I was like, this is so easy. I'm such a good coach. You know what I mean? And then the kids I had in 10, 11, 12 that were amazing athletes and players, some of the best players in the history of Division III we had at that time, graduated, and we kept winning. But man, it was a lot harder, and you get humbled real fast. Like, yeah, you're you're decent at what you do, but you're a hell of a lot better at it when you have really good players. You know what I mean? So I think, and there's always people out there that are better than you. I think the nice thing about playing. There's just always somebody better. If you end up winning the whole thing, yeah, you can say there was nobody better that year, but very rarely is that going to happen next year. Like almost in every sport, it's hard to repeat. And even most of the years, I don't know if the best team truly always wins it. You know what I mean? Especially in a sport like softball, baseball, where you have so many things that come into play. Do the hits find the right holes? The strike zone fit you? Did you stay healthy? Pitching wise, where your pitcher able to stay healthy that time of year? Did you stay out of the loser's bracket where you could run your number one the whole time? Whatever, you know what I mean? There's so many things that go into it. So there's been years where I'm like, we're every bit as good, and I probably did every bit as good a job of coaching. I'm not better in some of the years we won the World Series, but we just end up not winning it. Does that mean that year's a failure? No, you know what I mean? I think that's the part. Sometimes I get more pissed off when I get older. Like this year, for example, we finished third in the World Series. Great year. We were 45-7. We led the country in almost every offensive category, broke the single season record for home runs hit in a season, all these amazing accomplishments. But yet when you're done, about every person I run into is like, so sorry you guys got third. Like, that's to be so disappointing. And I'm like, no, it really wasn't. Like, it was awesome. Like, we graduated the year before the pitcher of the year in the whole country. We had a sophomore kid from Lakeview, Oregon. If you know where Lakeview's at, out in the freaking middle of nowhere, that's our number one pitcher now. We're not real deep in the circle, to be honest. And we have a great offense. You'd have told us at the start of the year we'd go to the World Series again and finish third. Like every kid on our team would have taken it. You know what I mean? So we could have won it, but like we would have had to have a few more things go our way. And our kids played great. We lost the last game 9-8 in 8 innings. You know what I mean? Like we went out fighting, just like you hope a team does if you're the coach. And so, but that's how society is. You know what I mean? Everybody, especially that's even outside of sports, that doesn't get it. Like they just judge it all. Did you end up winning the whole thing? Many times when you get good, and it's like, well, it's really freaking hard to do if you didn't know. Like, in softball, there's 420 teams playing Division III softball. Like, you're going to be the best of 420. Like, a few things got to go your way, and yeah, you got to be pretty good.
Obviously, there's just so much turnover and attrition at the Division I level, and I think in all sports. And then last year, when I was at Oregon State, they had a lot of turnover with their softball program. Are you seeing schools at the Division I level starting to kind of recruit down and look at D2, D3, some successful programs at that level and trying to pull some kids up? Have you experienced it?
In football is always going to be at the apex of all that draft.
Yeah.
The way football works. I think one awesome thing about coaching at Division III is we're pretty immune for the most part. It's happening, but compared to Division I, we're pretty immune to the portal world, pretty immune to the we're going to transfer all the time world. It's still happening. We had in the last 4 years we've had 3 kids, maybe 4, transfer out trying to go to the higher level. You know what I mean? If that's what they want to do and they have the great opportunity, like we're going to support the heck out of them just because you want kids to succeed. That's why we're doing it. But, at the same time, you just want them to see, I think, in the right lens. I think that's the hard part. And I think Coach Smith and I both have a really hard time sometimes with it just because we're the exact opposite, where we've been so loyal to Linfield for so long. Yeah. And you get a feel for what it's like to kind of have a legacy and to finish what you start and all those type of things. And the things that are kind of lost in the way that, unfortunately, the portal world's worked with. Like, if you're not happy, you don't like the coach, you don't like your playing time, you don't like how much money you're getting in NIL, then freaking jump in the portal and go somewhere else. You know what I mean? And obviously every old hat coach that talks doesn't like that part. You balance it with obviously the need for players to have the ability to make money and to use their talents to make money. But like obviously the system is very skewed right now. I don't think anybody would argue with that. You know what I mean? But it's unfortunate that some of the things that we used to get out of sports has been lost at that level a little bit in terms of the ability to like have to stick through it and endure some tough things. And, and I know you had Lever on and was listening to his quote about, one of our obligations is to try to find ways to make things tough for kids, to make them tougher for life, because life's not easy. And unfortunately, that's one of those things that we've kind of taken away that is, decreased our chances in some ways to help kids, I think, overcome adversity and be tough and some of those things. But in answer to your question, like, we're pretty immune. Softball hasn't happened at all. I think part of that, hopefully in a good way, is we do a good enough job, I think, making the kids realize you're not going to get what you get with us at very many places in the country in terms of a chance to win, but also more importantly, a program that really tries to balance like coaching the heck out of you, but also having a lot of fun, enjoying the heck out of it. Kids that watch our team play, I think, are pretty amazed at how our kids are having a lot of fun in the dugout. I mean, people that watch me coach football come and they're like, how in the world can you handle all the cheering that's going on? And you got kids wearing hats and dancing before the game. And, and that's the two opposites of the sport. And that killed me when I first started coaching the sport. But then you kind of realize, and you even read a lot of stuff, it's their coping mechanism to deal with like the stress of the game, you know what I mean? And gets their mind off it, gets them to relax, and inherently lets most of them play better, you know what I mean? Football, you go walk in a football locker room, obviously, you got 20 different ways to handle it. You got the guy with his headphones on, banging his head against the locker. You got this guy throwing chairs, and you got the other guy that's walking around cracking jokes, you know what I mean? We had a Hawaiian guy close to when you played. He used to walk down the 50-yard line and stare down the other team and spit on the other side of the 50 to let them know he was going to spit on their side of the field. That was his way to get ready. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has a different way to get ready, but that's obviously one of the fun parts of the game, is observing all that stuff.
Look at Linfield, the football program, softball program, sustain success, sustain culture. If you were to, hypothetical, if you were to ever go somewhere else and establish or work for a new program, how are you building that culture from ground up? Because I'm looking at your softball team, and when I was there up until now, like, it's just freaking kicking ass, and they do a good job just from being around the program of the upperclassmen bringing in the underclassmen and kind of showing them the ways. So if you were to start brand new, how would you go about building your culture?
I mean, we kind of do it in softball when I took over, you know what I mean? Because I was new. And so I think you just start on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's how you do everything, you know what I mean? You try to day-to-day basis have a mindset of like, how are you going to make the culture better, but also how are you going to get the qualities you want from your team to show up obviously in games, but also to permeate through the program, you know what I mean? So how do you make the qualities of hard work? How do you make the qualities of being a team first player? How do you make the qualities of being unselfish? How do you make the qualities of, balancing hard work with fun? Like, how do you get those things to kind of show up every day? And then you make sure those are not in the forefront, but certainly near the forefront of your mind as you keep planning practice every day. Softball for me is a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but like, you can manipulate the softball schedule so much. Maybe that's because I'm the head coach in the sport, but also like, football, people ask me the difference in it. Football is so, as militaristic to some degree when it comes to practice. Like, you have this amount of time, it's on the clock, you got 10 minutes for this, you got 5 minutes for that, you're doing this for 15, you're coming over for 10, like every minute is accounted for. And we don't go even close to that extreme in softball, but in softball, like, you got to hit, and then you got to go over and you want to get some base running work in, and you got transition time, and it's a much more individual skill sport. So we can, and the roster's smaller, that helps a lot. We have 30 kids, and so if I want to budget out 15 minutes, we want to play a game to start practice, and we play a lot of games, but like, you want to play dodgeball, or you want to do some stupid game with like blindfolds and make fun of kids or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, just so they have something that breaks up the monotony, we can do that, you know what I mean? And for us, when I first started in 2002, like, we just decided we want to get good at hitting. So what does it take? Well, you got to hit a lot every day. Like, that's one of the things that you got to do a lot. So we hit a lot, and the kids started joking. It was the 10,000 cut club. Every day you're getting and it wasn't 10,000, but in their mind, they're getting 10,000 cuts a day. And so, but after a while, they took pride in that. And part of the reason they took pride is, one, we did it every day, whether it was raining or cold or whatever. Like, we were gonna get our work done. But then they started to see the on-field result of the work, you know what I mean? And I think the two go hand in hand. If you say all this stuff and you get kids to start to buy in, and you just keep losing, you're going to lose some kids, because like, they don't believe it's working, you know what I mean? And unfortunately for us in softball, we hit a lot, and then I asked the kids to make a huge investment in the weight room compared to what they were used to, and try to get bigger, stronger, faster as athletes. And then fortunately for us, we started to win games. And so then they got to see the return on the investment. The buy-in kept increasing, you know what I mean? And then we kept getting better and better, and the buy-in kept increasing. I had some kids that got incredibly invested in what we were doing video wise. When I first started, we were stuck on the stupid VHS tape. So I used to have a kid that would come in and we had a tape for every kid. They'd have your tape, they'd take your tape, put it in the double deck VCR, record your swings onto the VHS tape, take that tape out, put the new kid's tape in, record their things. Each kid had their own thing on the VHS. But that was stuff like no other small college program was investing that much in their kids to like help them get better from that standpoint back in that day when VHS was just a pain in the butt. I think if the players really see that you're making unbelievable efforts for them too, I think that helps the culture. You know what I mean? I think I need to be the hardest working, or at least one of the hardest working people in the program, if I'm going to ask them to work hard. And so if they see me working hard day in, day out, regardless, and not, trying not to obviously come to practice pissed off, in a bad mood. Sometimes when you're tired and like you said, scout teams effing up stuff, maybe you get pissed off every once in a while, but that's one area I've gotten a lot better. I used to get pissed a lot, at practice and get pissed at kids, and I still do occasionally. But like, it's very rarely anymore because I realize that's not what I'm asking of them. You know what I mean? I'm not asking them the first thing that goes wrong that they're getting pissed and yelling at a teammate and throwing their helmet or whatever. So it's all about, again, all coach speak stuff, but like just having the best day, best practice you can have, and then in the moment, like win that play, win that drill, whatever, and then move on to the next thing. And if I want that from them, then I got to try to emulate that the best way I can. And kids are pretty resilient; like they're way better coming off losses than I am. As I told you, a loss for me is a stab in the heart. But like kids are pretty upset. But like you come back to practice on Monday, Tuesday, most kids like they're just ready to go again. They aren't dwelling on practice. So like you can't. You know what I mean? They're not.
You brought up an interesting point that I never thought about. Obviously, have a lot of admiration for you for being a successful defense coordinator and a hell of a softball coach. And you just brought up the fact that, if kids see you working hard and they see you that you truly care, that the buy-in is going to be a little greater. And it just dawned on me, is like that. I mean, that's kind of what happened to me. And subconsciously, I didn't know it. Like one of the reasons I respect the hell out of you is because you do it at a high level with both football and softball. If there was advice that you could give to your younger self or younger coaches coming up, whether softball coach or football coach, what would that advice be?
I don't know. I think it's hard. I think you want to make mistakes when you're young. So then you want to go back and tell everything to avoid, because I don't think you end up being who you are if you avoid all those mistakes when you're young. You know what I mean? A little bit. But yeah, I think like we talked about, I think trying to balance early on the need to win and succeed with like, family, but also your personal health. I was a big guy. Like I just grinded and was like, I'm too busy to work out. You know what I mean? So like when I was younger, got up to like 270 at one point. It's because I was just grinding. And Coach Swan, who was a Hawaiian guy, like he was big. Like we'd work till midnight. He'd be bringing in food, pizza at 11 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? Like terrible lifestyle to like be a healthy individual. You know what I mean? But like, if you're going to be a dad and all that, like you got to be healthy, you know what I mean? And just obviously in terms of and to be a good coach, I think it's really hard to be, go ask kids to run and sprint and do all this stuff. And then you're an unhealthy turd, you know what I mean? In terms of how you look and how you do things. So I think trying to make sure you balance the need for that. I'm still not great at it, but trying to be good there. I think trying to make sure you understand with kids, like most kids want to be good. So getting pissed at them for not doing the things you want is not necessarily the right tact all the time. I think trying to just keep helping them to get to the path that's going to make them good, and realize some kids need, some kids need more structure, but like you have to have fun. I think, kids inherently want to play sports to have fun and enjoy their experience. I think most kids, in particular, the kids we're coaching at Division III in high school, gets this a lot. Like this is the last time they're going to get to play that sport competitively again in their life. You know what I mean? So I tell this to softball kids, and football kids, but like this is the last time you're ever going to play college softball, college football ever in your life. You're never going to go out again. Football is even worse. Like you can't go out and just put on pads and a helmet and show up at the park on Sunday and play football. And if you do, it's in some nasty ass semi-pro league with like Fat Joe next to you who's like 400 pounds, got his beer belly hanging out and can't get out of his stance. You know what I mean? Like it's not the same. And softball wise, same thing. You're going to show up to a slow pitch game. That's the best they can get to, you know what I mean? And like you got, three other kids that can't catch a fly ball and everybody's lazy and whatever. So it's just never, ever going to be the same, where you get all these kids that are invested in something, that are working for a goal together. means the world to them. They get to travel together, you get to practice every together, you get to take classes together, all the stuff that's awesome that I tell them all the time. Like, that'll be the thing you're going to miss the most. Right? When you get out, you're going to miss getting to play the game, but what you're going to miss the most is just having constant access to friends and people who have the same goals and aspirations to some degree as you, and you get to see them every day, and they're there to kind of pick you up on the days you don't feel like running. Like, so and so's next to me, and man, he's busting his ass today. Like, that motivates me to get going. Like, in real life, you got to get up, and if you're tired tomorrow and like you don't want to, help the kids, like, there's no one right next to you except for your wife, but even your wife's maybe at work. Like, it's just you got to do it all. So, and you just never get the constant access to friends. So I think you want to make sure that part of it is good, because like you want it to be, hopefully, if not one of the best experiences in their life, like certainly in the top 2 or 3 when they look back of like, man, that was an awesome 4 years that I got to spend, playing a sport I love and doing all that. And so inherently, that's really our job as I've gotten older, is to make their experience great. Yes, does that involve winning? It does. But like inherently, that's your number one job, is to make their experience great and to help them obviously be successful when they get done with the sport. You know what I mean? Because they got 50 years of life to live. And no one's going to have a rat's butt how many home runs they hit or how many sacks you had. You know what I mean? Like, nobody. Like, there might be the occasional person that cares, but 99.5% of the people you're going to meet are not going to walk up and say, how many home runs did you hit? Oh, that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care.
I'm thinking back to our check-in day fall camp. What does the first day look like, or what does that first meeting look like for softball? And does it differentiate from that first meeting with football, with the defense?
I mean, they're both meetings for me. I like to make sure we lay down the expectations from that standpoint that are actually similar. You know what I mean? I go through I just go through what we expect. You know what I mean, and why we expect it to some degree. And then I usually try to have the players, especially in softball where it's a small roster, like talk a little bit about why, what it means to them and why we expect stuff. But football is harder because obviously, man, you got to jump into scheme pretty fast because we got 2.5 weeks before we play a game. And unlike in particular Division I or even high school where you have your kids around and you can do 7-on-7 throughout the summer, like our kids are spread all over the frickin' forever, whatever right now. We can't practice with them. So we got freshmen coming in that don't even know, what a flop front is or how to line up against deuce. So man, you gotta jump into scheme pretty fast for us, which is really unfortunate. I think, you look at one reason I really love softball is because it's a spring sport. We get fall with them. We get 6 weeks of preseason practice with them before you ever go play a game. So I got all this time to build culture, you know what I mean? And to like do all this fun stuff. We do like a week of Catball Olympics where we do relays and we do a dance off, we do a lip sync, we do all this stuff, you know what I mean? So it's all this time. In football, we do it. We have the Swim Olympics, as you know, that you participate in. And we do some things like that, which help. And we try to do some night activities, but like you have so much to do in football. Like it's exhausting to some degree. We're doing 3 meetings per day during camp with a 3-hour practice. Guys are eating and recovering in between. And sometimes you get to the night and you have this activity plan. You look at all the guys and you're like, we're so tired. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to do some stupid game you guys came up with as coaches. Like, let us go rest. You know what I mean? So you got to balance that out and try to find the right times. We try to, do a slip and slide. We, some things that you kind of mix in to make it fun. But anyway, back to your question, first day, like, as you get older, you realize that half the kids are scared to death. You know what I mean? Especially in football, you're moving away from home. You got a Hawaii kid who just got dropped off from the islands. He's been the mainland, maybe never. Like, we've had kids like that. They're showing up and mom and dad are leaving in 2 days and you drop me off in the middle of nowhere. I don't know anybody. I'm looking around. All of a sudden there's a senior that's, you can tell is a freaking 30 pounds heavier than me and will kick my ass. And I don't know anything. I don't have any friends. I don't know the scheme. Man, it's hard. And so we I think, try to take more of the approach now where we tell kids up front, man, it's hard and expect it to be hard. Like, we're going to help you as much as we can. But if you come in as a freshman, and you think it's going to be easy, man, you're falsely mistaken. Like, it's going to be hard. And some kids transition certainly way easier, but almost every freshman's going to suffer in one area, whether it's social adjustment, academic adjustment, football adjustment, whatever it's going to be, they're going to struggle in some areas. Some kids struggle in every area. And those are the kids, obviously, that unfortunately don't usually last, but it's our job to try to catch them before that happens and hopefully fix it, or give them resources to have them help.
What would you say is the greatest challenge of coaching?
Obviously, it depends a lot on the level you coach. Obviously, I'm not whatever egotistical enough to think, well, my problems are the same as your problems if you're the head coach at Oregon State, or even the head coaches you have in high school that you've had on, have way different problems to some degree than sometimes we do. But I think, time, and I think, we're in a world that you just judge yourself a lot based on sometimes wins and losses and production, you know what I mean? And I think you have to just step back sometimes, and in the situation you're in, are you doing the absolute best you can do? And understand what is that, you know what I mean? Again, the type of kids and maybe environment you have at a Silverton is way different than you have at a North Salem, you know what I mean, or a Tualatin, and Tualatin's way different than whatever. And you got West Lynn compared to McMinnville. Like, the clientele you have, whether it's because of socioeconomic reasons or whether because it's population, are way different. So sometimes you're going to go 5-5, and you look and you feel terrible. Like, man, we were 5-5. It's like, well, for what you had to work with from a foundational standpoint, 5-5 is a freaking awesome job of coaching. You know what I mean? Like, you did an unbelievable job coaching. And like I said, the hard part in our society is most people will never recognize that you're 5-5, like you're average. And like, no, that guy coached his ass off. We've had guys at football camp sometimes, and you watch them, and we had a guy that stands out. They used to come, and he was literally a one-man show, man. He was coaching, like, it seemed like all 11 guys on offense and all 11 guys on defense, and he had a smaller school. He had a bunch of small, tough kids, you know what I mean? And man, they'd come to camp and they'd hang with all these teams that were way bigger schools, and they'd have, a staff with 5 coaches coaching on their side. But like, he had a ton of respect for that guy, man. He was coaching his butt off. And so I think that's, more than anything, just trying to keep that in perspective. And I think we tell kids all the time, remember your why. Like, why are you doing this job? And I think especially for us that do coach at the non-higher Division I level, where, again, not for all of them, but I think for a lot of them, obviously all the stuff we talked about earlier, the portal and the money. Like, the money obviously changes everything. You know what I mean? When you coach at small college or you coach in high school, you find out real fast you're not doing it for the money, right? So why are you doing this? Why are you staying up, like you said, till 12 or 1 to win some D3 football game that literally 99% of the people don't give a rat's ass about? Like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? And you're doing it for the kids, and you're doing it for your own personal pride, and you're doing it so you have an impact on the kids you're coaching, because they're going to go live that next 50 years of life afterward. And the stupid thing is, like, you look at it and, like, no one remembers anyway. Like, who remembers the score of the Oregon State game against so-and-so in 2015? Like, nobody, except for maybe somebody played in it. But, like, even you ask all the fans who were in the stands that day 10 years ago, like, not one of them hardly remembers the damn score of the game or what really happened. So we just place too much of an emphasis sometimes, like, thinking that's embedded forever and defines who you are. And it really doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, the kids will, remember again. I tell our kids all the time, like, as teammates, they're going to remember how you got treated as a teammate and how you were supported. And you'll remember that way more than you'll remember how many games you won and lost.
I want to ask a question here, talking about pride and talking about competing. Do you think the pride is not wanting to fail, or do you think the pride is wanting to succeed above?
I don't know. It goes back to the thing I tell our both teams at the start of the year. I think it goes back to just having pride in your name. We call it personal signature, but like that every time you go do something, it's like you put your signature on it. You know what I mean? So I joke with the kids, like, if I told you to go clean up our stupid equipment shed, because we're not Division I, we don't have managers doing it. So at the end of practice, like, we got some guys we go still go put the gear away. But we go over and the gear is freaking strewn about and, like, thrown all in the right places and looks like crap. Then you just sign that thing crap. Like, so that's what we associate with you, right? So Keanu is your name is not Keanu, it's crap. You know what I mean? And understanding that carries with you in however you do. So when you turn in an English paper and you put your name on it, like, do you have any freaking pride in your name? And I think that's one thing, unfortunately, that's got lost a lot. It's amazing how many kids don't have any pride in their name. Like, they're willing to just turn in a piece of crap work in anything, you know what I mean? And they're willing to even, put in not a very good effort sometimes at practice. And to have personal pride in your name is a big thing that I try to remind kids that you should have. Like, if you don't have that, like, you don't have much of a chance sometimes to really be successful, because, like, that's there's only one of you only get one life to live. Like, I think I place too much, I care too much what other people think. I think that's part of it. You know what I mean? You want to balance the two. You don't want to care about what everybody thinks, but you certainly want to care about the important people. You know what I mean? So what do the kids you coach think? What does your boss think if that your boss is worthy of that. Sometimes bosses aren't, maybe, but like most of the time you hope they are. And what does your family think? You know what I mean? Are they proud of what you're doing? And I think if you do that, then I think that's the reason you do it. You know what I mean? We look back and be proud. And I tell our kids in the sports, like, and Joe tells the football team this too, but like our end goal in football is to have a really good year and to get as good as we can and go get measured against another best team in the country, all in the reality of knowing that we're probably going to get our heart broken and we're going to lose to some team in the Midwest or Texas. That's what's happened doing this for 24 years, more often than not, right? Softball is the same thing. We're going to get measured and hopefully play against the best teams in the country. We've won it twice, but we've lost the other 22 times at some point. Now, we've made it to the World Series 9 times, but that's even almost harder because you got so close to the end and then you lost. You know what I mean? So you're probably going to lose at some point. But what, in the end, you look back and go, I couldn't have done anything else, right? What else could I have done? Could we have practiced more? No, I don't think we could have. Could I have stayed up a little bit later and game plan? Would that have made the difference? Like, no. You know what I mean? Like, did the kid just jump over us and moss us for a ball and win the game? And do I have any control over that? No. You know what I mean? So I think that's what you want to look back on is, did you have enough pride in what you're doing that you look back and like, yeah, we just got beat, which is okay. But it wasn't for lack of effort or preparation, because those are things, again, that you can control.
What do we got?
Tell me what you think. Never done mac salad.
I got a little mac salad, barbecue chicken.
Nice.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give it a little, you said shoyu chicken?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd buy that.
Hey, try the mac salad. Never had the mac salad. I've never made mac salad. What am I missing in that?
Oh, I've never made mac salad. This is good, though.
It tastes okay?
Real good. Thank you. Well, that's a great answer, Coach. You talked about going out. I'm going to just finish this bite real quick. Yeah. I'm back. While you're talking, I just thought about, you talked about going out and getting measured against the best and, competing against Whitewater, competing against the Mary Hardin Baylors, the St. Thomases of the world. Those are some of my favorite games, even though the result wasn't always in our favor. For you in coaching, going against the best and competing against the best, is that some of your favorite games to coach against?
Well, for sure. Especially the ones that you find a way to win. But even the tough ones where your kids competed. There was those a few years when you were playing where we had those super tough games with Whitewater where we end up losing. And they end up, I think most of the time, went on to win the national championship, where we were kind of being their toughest game of the year. But we're playing at their place, you know what I mean? Like, tough place to play. It's Wisconsin. It's winter. You watch them on film. You watch them in warm-ups. And you're like, man, these guys are really good. Like, can we hang in there? You know what I mean? And then, to our kids' credit, they not only hung in there, they gave them freaking everything they could fight for. A couple of times we're obviously ahead even in the fourth quarter. So in the same end, you're super disappointed, but in the other end, man, you're proud. You know what I mean? And I think going back to resources, sometimes you look at, again, the big picture view, which not a lot of people do, but like you look at Linfield, like, man, we got 1,600 kids. We're in Oregon, you know what I mean, which isn't necessarily the hotbed of athletic talent for football in the country, you know what I mean? Here we are competing against, let's say, Whitewater, state school, 10,000 kids, state school standards, right next to Chicago, Milwaukee, major metropolitan areas, much bigger recruiting base, way cheaper to recruit kids, 10,000 seat stadium, whatever they got, you know what I mean? And here we are, 1,600 students at Linfield, one out of every, 10 kids is a football player almost, because we've got 140 kids out for football. And here we are. We're going toe-to-toe, and we're given this team that's got all these inherent advantages, like everything they got. And why are we doing it? And it's because we get good kids, we develop kids, and we have good culture. I mean, that's we don't have better players. We have good players, but certainly you went down the roster man for man, like they're better at most positions, or at least equal. You know what I mean? But how you do things can overcome a lot. Culture can overcome a lot. Can't overcome everything, like, for sure, but you can certainly close the gap a lot if you can be superior in those areas. And in football, obviously, being able to execute, particularly on offense, you know what I mean, is such a big thing if you can find ways to execute what you're wanting to do. And, we found, obviously, is the quarterback position, no surprise to anybody, but the quarterback position obviously makes a humongous difference. You can equate the teams fairly quickly if you're just that good at quarterback. But yeah, those are some of the more memorable games. We've had several in softball over the years, and you show up and the kid's got a .5 ERA and, gives up a run every 5 games, and your kids show up and annihilate the kid, in terms of they're able to get to him and score runs. And in softball, you just watch the whole team melt. If you're a dominant pitching team and you get to the head of the snake, the whole team just melts if you can get to that kid, which is, always fun from a competitive standpoint if that can happen.
I briefed you on it before we got on. Nella question of the day. My daughter had a question for you. What was your favorite show growing up?
I don't know if I had one, but I mean, and I don't have a very good childhood memory. I don't know why, but shows I remember watching were the Dukes of Hazzard and the Incredible Hulk was a big one, and the Bionic Man was a big one. So those were big ones. This was pre Sports Center days. If Sports Center would have been around, it probably would have been Sports Center. But yeah, those were big ones. I got told a story. I don't remember it, but my mom told me she used to have this older lady watch me, and when I was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. And one day the lady called my mom and told her she needed to come get me because she was pretty sure I was possessed by the devil. And my mom came and was asking her more explicitly what made her think I was possessed by the devil. It's because I was pretending I was the Hulk and I was ripping my shirt apart and becoming the Hulk at my babysitter's. So yeah, I guess I was a big Hulk fan for a while.
Sounds like the Hulk was number one there. So going to transition a little bit and talk a little bit about team building, team dynamics. What does the word team mean to you?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's overcomplicated. I think it's just, do you have everybody has an invested interest in the best thing that's what's best for the team. You know what I mean? I think you have to have kids that are individually motivated, but sometimes that's okay because they have to understand if kids do some things that are the best for them, that is what's best for the team, right? So if you get bigger, stronger, faster, that's helping the team. Right. So, but what is also great for the team is if you take Johnny and Bobby with you and you make them bigger, stronger, faster, then that's even better for the team because you're getting bigger, stronger, faster, but so is Johnny, Bobby, and whoever. And so I think trying to get kids to understand that there's a certain obligation on your part, doing and working hard is good for the team, but bringing other people along with you is even more important. And you're going to get asked in every sport you play almost to have certain kids that have to do very unglamorous roles. And so getting them to understand that that's what you need to do because that's what's best for the team is hard to do. But I think if your culture permeates that, rewards that, highlights that, you have a way better chance to get it done. And so for us, in softball, for example, we have, and this is exact in football, but in softball, we have, inherently 30 kids on the roster about every year. Well, every game we're playing maybe 13, 14 kids, counting kids who go in and pinch run, right? And even them, they're in for one series and then they're out basically. So how do you get the other 15 kids to buy in? Well, you got to have roles for them and you got to make those roles highlighted and important and you got to show some value to them. Otherwise, teamwork dissipates real fast because the kids who aren't playing are when you're talking all this crap about team, you're really not talking about me. You're just talking about the kids who are playing. And so you just have to get them to understand that team goes from the first kid on the roster to the last kid on the roster. And the first kids on the roster got to understand that even though they're not necessarily helping you physically in your mind on the field, they're still helping the kids that aren't, right? So they're helping because they help with the feel of practice. They help with the quality of practice. They help with the energy on the sideline during the game. They help with sometimes for us doing non-glorious jobs. They're the bullpen and the catcher getting the backup pitcher warm. They're the kid that's keeping some score thing or scouting thing in the dugout. They're a kid that's helping with whatever, you know what I mean? You get all those things. In football, we ask kids that aren't playing sometimes to help on the sideline with the route crew, you know what I mean? You're specifically watching the number 2 receiver and you need to be able to report after the play. That kid ran a 5-yard out so we can get it down and get documented and add that to our film that obviously we're getting. And now film's becoming a bigger deal on the sideline. But in the past, especially D3, you had no film. So everything you were trying to recollect after a series was either what you saw as a coach or what you could get from our route crew and those guys in terms of drawing plays up and having those on the sideline. So, but again, you have to get the older kids in the starters to understand that they have to honor those kids and they have to treat them with respect and they have to bring them along and they have to make it fun for them. You know what I mean? I think that's one thing that is really cool at Linfield. We've taken pride in football forever is we're not going to be the program that says, hey, freshmen, every day you go get the gear and put it away. How dumb is that? You want the freshmen to love football and be into it and you're going to treat them like crap every day. It's no, why don't today the seniors, you put the gear away and then the juniors the next day and then the freshmen and then maybe, the freshmen do it maybe more often, but it doesn't have to be their thing all the time where you treat them like crap. Because you're going to go and say you're going to do all these really team-oriented things, then you're going to do all this crap that's exactly opposite team-oriented. And some kids do it on their own. I give our softball team a hard time because we'll go on a road trip and we'll have 3 vans. And all the cool kids, all the seniors, we get to be in this van together because we're going to have fun and do that. And they want all the other kids to go to the other vans. I'm like, all right, so we're going to talk about team all the time, and then you're basically going to crap on team and say, okay, when it's fun time, us cool kids will hang out, and you guys go be in there in the non-cool kid van. What kind of message does that send to the kids? So I try to prep kids on that kind of stuff. Sometimes you're not thinking about it, but there's decisions like that you make that go against team. You know what I mean? So if you're going to say team, make sure as a coach what you're asking and what you're doing reflects team. You know what I mean? Like you can't be the coach, I think, that says team and then you treat certain sex like crap. Like that's not what team is.
I know this is going to be hard to answer, but you only can take one quality, and this is what I want my team to be known about or be known for. What would that quality be?
I mean, I think they go together, but I think obviously, whether you want to say tough, competitor, you know what I mean, like that, because I think if you work hard and you invest and you prepare, you will be that. You'll be a competitor and you'll be tough. You know what I mean? So if I took the end result, you know what I mean, which would be your competitor and your tough / mentally tough, that'd be the one I'd pick. But I think because it would then require you the other one that I think you have to have foundationally is to be hardworking. You know what I mean? I think that's the one, that inherently in that circle of values you get, that's what I would pick.
Is there anyone, I remember I asked you about kind of your greatest influences, but is there any material, any things that you like to read? I remember you gave me a book from, I think it was Jay Bilas, Competitive Toughness, but is there anyone that you kind of draw on that helps your philosophy?
I'm a big sports book nerd. That's kind of what I do when I do have a little bit of downtime. My wife and my kids give me a really hard time because they read for pleasure. They read. My 15-year-old daughter's probably read 15 books already this summer, devours books, but they're all books for fun in their whatever, all these series, fantasy series, whatever, all these different things. When I read, if I ever read, it's always a sports book. It's always a motivational book. I got my highlighter out and I'm highlighting things as I go. And so my family gives me a hard time. It's like, can you not just read a book for pleasure? And I'm like, I don't really want to read a book for pleasure. I want to read a book to get better. Like that's how kind of I'm wired. And then I'm like, well, why do you highlight it? I'm like, because I'll remember it better. Obviously every study you read, if you highlight or you take the time to write it down, what you read, you're gonna retain it better. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'll even go back and make some notes on things, or now you can type it obviously in the computer, but whatever. So there's a ton. You know what I mean? And there's basketball stuff. It's good. There's obviously a ton of football stuff, but there's stuff to learn from everybody. You know what I mean? And it's amazing in the sports world. You get these kind of sports that maybe get not necessarily overlooked, but don't get as much hype. And you just find just some amazing, obviously, coaches that have had such long-term success. You look at, he's gotten a lot of accolades, but Gino with UConn women's basketball, for example, you know what I mean? You listen to that guy and he certainly has faults, as everybody does, but like his passion, his commitment, his dedication to excellence and commitment, like all those things are things you listen and study him a little bit. A great guy to learn from. You know what I mean? You look at guys, like obviously Nick Saban at that level and obviously what he did for so long and the process he had and all those type of things, like you can learn a ton. And then you get now obviously the field of sports, whatever, psychology and that's become a much bigger thing. So you can find different people to read that way to pick stuff from. And you do it long enough, you're probably not reading a book to change everything or find 100 new ideas. You're just at that point trying to find 2 or 3, or sometimes just reinforcing what you already knew and believed, and maybe find a certain way to maybe highlight it a little bit better. And then sometimes you find something like I gave you that's just good that you can share with kids. Because kids now, I don't know, it's harder. You know what I mean? I think the big change for me in doing this for 20 years is kids are a lot more, maybe they're more open with it, but they deal with more mental struggles than kids did for sure 20 and whatever you want to blame it on, you know what I mean? Social media, that's a big one that gets blamed, but whatever. But they are, because I get, a meeting with kids, you get, probably 10 times out of 10, probably 10 times, it seems like 5 times as many meetings during the year with kids that just struggle. You know what I mean? They're struggling with lack of success. They're struggling with something socially. They're struggling with something at home. And so having sometimes resources like that to give them that maybe would speak to them or give them some other resource besides just me or someone else on campus. Not that you can't solve, not saying solve every problem with the book, but it's just another resource. Yeah, and so I think those type of things. But I don't know if there's anyone in particular. I've read so many, there's not one that it just stands out. But John Wooden was one when I first started coaching, to be honest. That was when I read everything I could pretty much find on John Wooden. And he's definitely from a different time and a different era. You know what I mean? I think you read some of the things that our kids laugh now because he's using, so many terms now that are from, 100, not 100.
Industriousness.
100, Industriousness is a big one. But, gosh darn, and you know what I mean? Like, just a lot of sayings that way. But his philosophy and the way he did things is certainly a way I tried to emulate a lot of things that he did and the success he had, but also how long it took him to get there. You know what I mean? And most people don't realize, like, he didn't win his first natty until he'd been coaching for like 20 some years, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden won 10 in a row. up until that point, most people were like, oh, this guy's a pretty average coach. And then, well, he did the same thing. He just got better players and got better at what he did, but he got better players, you know what I mean? And kept the same system and kept improving it. But then wins 10 in a row, and then everybody thinks he's the greatest coach ever, you know what I mean? And that goes into kind of what we were saying earlier. Like, that's the bad part about society is sometimes the only thing that makes you really good at something is that you're winning national championships, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's necessarily the only thing that makes you really good at coaching.
I want the name of the gentleman or the school that you were talking about earlier. Who was that? What school was that?
At
Or you
football?
can you can tell me off camera.
No, I'm pretty sure it was a center with John Lambert.
The center?
So yeah, the center's come to camp forever, and he's got more of a staff now. He actually still comes to camp, but there's a few years when they were running the old double wing. You know what I mean? He would run that double wing offense, and he was in there, and he was literally, it seemed like coaching every position.
That's cool. What separates a great team from a good team?
I mean, all the stuff we just talked about. I think, you know, you can go through the list, but one is obviously the quality of the players. You know what I mean? So that's one. Like, you get the quarterback in football, or you get the D end who no one can block, or you get the receiver that's 6'4" and can jump and is fast. Like, those are guys that change the game, you know what I mean, and can make a team from good to great for sure. I think obviously the way you do things and your attention to detail certainly separates the good from the great. Your ability to be consistent in football, defense, and pitching are very similar, where you can be really good 5 times in a row and then you're terrible in the 6th and you just gave up a score. And so being able to be really, really consistent and not give up things that are easy. I think one thing that we preach probably the most on defense at Linfield is don't give up big plays. You study everything and how offenses score. If you give up a play of more than 15 yards in a drive, the chance of that team scoring goes up astronomically. You know what I mean? So trying to really find ways to limit big plays on the other team. And so what does that take? Well, you have to, again, this is stuff we go through with our team all the time, but you have to do all the little things right. You got to align correctly. You got to have your rise in the right place. You got to execute the right technique. You got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to pursue well. You got to do all those type of things, and then you won't give up big plays. You just go right from the beginning, and you don't align correctly, or you're not looking at the right thing, or obviously you misread something, or you have incredibly bad technique, or you don't pursue very well because you assume someone else is going to make the tackle. All of a sudden, you're giving up big plays. So it goes back to how can you do all those little things extremely well. And then I think just the cultural part of it will separate. I think you get a team that always seems like they're performing in the clutch in the clutch moments. Many times those teams are pretty tight. They have an inner belief, or they have the alpha that they all believe in so much that they will follow that guy. You know what I mean? You look at the Patriots and Tom Brady, they overachieved a lot for the talent they had. You look at the NFL, you know what I mean? And it's to some degree with the Chiefs now with Mahomes. You just watch them sometimes and you're like, man, their O-line is not very good, and they got, they've lost all their speed at outside receiver, but you can't beat the guy. Every game they're winning in the fourth quarter last year, it seemed like, you know what I mean, until they obviously finally ran against the buzzsaw with the Eagles. But, that either as a team you have that belief, or you have the alpha, and that's not just good. He's such a good leader, and he's so good in those critical moments that they believe in him. You know what I mean? And those are obviously the guys that, everyone wants. And usually in football, they're the quarterback because they're in charge of the ball. But, in basketball, you had it with guys like Jordan and those guys, Kobe, you know what I mean, that were obviously good, but they also had that alpha quality to them where guys like just knew that they were going to get the job done or help them get the job done. Softball, it's usually the pitcher. Same reason, they got the ball in their hand. They control it. You get the alpha kid. In softball, it's different because our kid can throw almost every game if they want to, especially in the playoffs. You're not relying on a 7-pitcher rotation, you know what I mean, like you have to get to deep in baseball. So in softball, you can have that one kid that can really carry a whole team and let them win. We've had runs in D3 softball where a dominant alpha pitcher's literally let a team win 3 natties in a row, you know what I mean, because like that kid's just that good and you can't beat him.
I'm thinking strictly more softball here. What do you say to your team after a big setback or a loss? What does that conversation look like?
I mean, it changes a lot if it's the end of the season, or if it's early in the season, or if it's
let's go early in the season, and then let's go last game of the year.
So early in the season, you get on them hard, right? You do, because you use it as motivation. You know what I mean? Like, we just got our ass kicked. Like, we got outplayed. I got outcoached. Like, we look like trash today. We got a long way to go. But we got time. We just got to go back to work. We got to get everything. We got to go grind and find a way to get better, because we hope we get to play these guys again sometime down the road. Hopefully this shows you, man, we're not good enough right now. You know what I mean? And then you get to toward the end of the year, you really start to soften up the message because you're not trying to ruin confidence before you get to the playoffs. You know what I mean? So I think at the end of the year, your job changes, and your job changes to use it, but use it in a better, probably a softer way, and try to balance the need for motivating them with not destroying confidence. You know what I mean? And at the same time, you're trying not to ever let them know it's okay that we lost. You know what I mean? It's not okay that we played bad, but like at the end of the year, this year, it was probably your next to last series of the year. Maybe third to last. Like we played bad, and we got 8 runs like in softball, and we didn't look good. So I got on the kids pretty hard, but at the same time, not nearly as hard as I would have early in the year. We didn't play well at pitcher in particular, and so that's harder because like we just said they're so important. Like if I just tell them that they suck and tell them that we have no chance to get better because we just got lit, that kid's probably not going to recover. You know what I mean? And they get in a big moment again, they start to do bad. They're going to remember what I told them, that like they're not good enough, or we suck. And so you can't do that. And so I think you go back to it. I think you deflect a little bit. You take a lot of it on you as a coach. Like, hey, yeah, we didn't do great today, but man, I didn't do a very good job either. I didn't call good pitches. I called a bad game. I put us in some bad positions. We didn't prepare for that enough. Even if you don't necessarily believe it a little bit as a coach, like take some of it, because the kids will appreciate it. Like no kid wants to hear it's all their fault. Like it's all you guys. I'm so good and you guys suck. I'm the master. I've done this for so long. I know everything. You guys suck. Like then you develop division between you and the players, and they don't like you anymore, and they don't trust you as much, and they're more fearful because they think you're going to blame losses on them. And so I think you're just trying to balance it more as you get toward the end of the year, and then when you lose at the end of the year, like why yell at them then? Like you're done. You know what I mean? Like at the end, then you're sad. You know what I mean? The seniors are done forever, and so it's much more of like it's like a funeral, to be honest. Like the last game when we lose, it's pretty sad. But while we all go in the locker room and guys are crying, you know what I mean, and we let the seniors talk one last time, and it's obviously way different.
How do you go about establishing, shared leadership within the team? Like, I know it's softball, you guys got all those cheers. Are you choreographing and scripting all those cheers?
Well, no. I have nothing to do with any of that. That's all the older kids. And that stuff just all gets passed down from like generation to generation. That's the cool part. Like our kids do celebration stuff that was been done 17 years ago, and they don't know why they do it. They just, when they get taught in, that's just what we do. And it was actually some kid that started it like 18 years ago. Some of those traditions, and like in between inning handshakes, and like our outfielders do this like they call it the jump and bump, like stuff like that stuff was literally being done like 20 years ago. The group started it, and then it just keeps going. I think with shared leadership, you just try to pick what things that you want them to be, but you need to have it because you want them to feel like they have ownership in the team. You know what I mean? In softball, I let them pick all kinds of things. You know what I mean? Like obviously I let them pick what uniform they want to wear. I let them pick a lot of times where they want to eat. If we have to take a day off, I get them pick a lot of times where they want to go on their day off. I ask our seniors a lot, especially at the end of the year, you know what I mean? Like, okay, what do you guys want to do tomorrow at practice? Like, what do you feel like we're missing? You know what I mean? And then I'll do a meeting sometimes, kind of that mid to end of the year time, and we'll do it at the beginning sometimes, but where I'll get them all, divide them up into groups of like 5, and I'll just ask them the questions that need to be asked. Like, what are we good at right now? What are we not good at right now? What do we need to do to get better at the things we're not good at right now? What things do you think we should do more in practice? What would make practice more fun for you guys, but not detract from the quality of practice? And then get their input. We write them up on the whiteboard. I take a picture of it so I don't forget. And then I go back when I plan practice, and I'll look at the picture and figure out, okay, what ones of those things can I realistically incorporate, you know what I mean, in what we're doing. And if you don't incorporate any of them, then they all think obviously you did the meeting for nothing. So then it doesn't have much effect. So you got to make sure you take some of their input and use it. But those are ways that is pretty easy. And you can, again, do it with a senior group, or you could do it with just like the whole team. That's our group in softball small enough. I can do it with the whole team in those scenarios, but I'll use the seniors for a lot of stuff because they've been through the gamut of things, you know what I mean, in terms of, even things like how tired are you guys? Do we need to back off on lifting this week? You know what I mean? With how our schedule was, we got back late from Georgia, and everybody seems like they're tired. Like, you guys good? Can we get up and lift at 6 a.m. on Tuesday? Like, do we need to change it? And at the same time, telling them, like, the easy answer is not the right answer. Just because it's easier for you, is that the right answer? Because that's obviously the tendency for most kids. So I try to get them to have the coach view of, like, what's truly best for us. You know what I mean? Like, not what's easy is what's, like, best for us and best for the team.
How do you go about your self-scout process? Like, especially because you got two sports and you kind of just freaking get thrown right into the next sport once football is done. In the summer, or I guess just give me the timeline when you revisit football, when you revisit softball. Are you looking scheme first? Are you looking at your systems and operations first? Kind of give me, I guess, the yearly timeline as far as the life of Jackson Vaughan.
Softball wise, football's so hard because we jumped from football into football recruiting, and football
Yeah.
recruiting is obviously its own, as you know, its own season. It's its own entity. It's its own 12-hour day job if you elect to spend 12 hours a day doing it. So, but in that, I'm also prepping for softball. So for me, during the window between when football's over and when softball starts, there's not a lot of room, to be honest, for self-scout time. That's when it should be done, probably before spring ball. So I'm able to do a little bit before spring ball, but not a lot, to be honest. I wait till the summer, like you said. So summer, I have some time. And so the summer, we go back and essentially look at the season in incredible details. I make, I don't know, I just shared it with the guys a month ago, but probably 200 cut-ups, let's say, right? But you're trying to break everything down into every section that you would evaluate your team, right? So situational things. So here's every third and long we had. Here's every third and extra long we had. Here's every third medium. Here's every third and short. Then go back and evaluate those. And what was the, from a win-loss standpoint, what was our conversion percentage? Like what was our conversion rate? We know it statistically. We can look it up. But then go back and actually watch it on video, because the statistic will tell you one thing and then the video tells you another, you know what I mean? So yeah, we gave up these 3 third downs, but they're all in scrub time. Our backups were in, like the stats don't necessarily tell you that, you know what I mean? So, but also, okay, the ones we gave up that were legit, why did we give them up? You know what I mean? What defense were we in? Did we not execute the defense? Did the offense know it was coming, have a great plan for that? Were we not good enough at this position? Did I call bad defense? Like, what was the reason that they gave up that third down? Because like, you're trying to win. I think that's one thing we try to do, or I try to do, is like third down is a humongous down. You either get off the field or you don't, right? And so last year we were, I think, top 5 in the country in third down defense, right? So that's one reason we were so good, is like, you got to get the team off on third down. So scout the hell of them, what they like to do on third down, but then have your packages for third down that you feel like are obviously going to take away what they do well. So we studied the heck out of that. You got red zone, right? So what you're doing a red zone, what you're doing a short yardage, because those are each different components that you want to be good at. And again, if we want to give our kids the best chance, one thing that's entertaining to me watching film is how many teams don't change hardly at all when they get into short yardage or goal line situations. Kind of run their base defense and they modify it slightly and they go, and it's like, how in the world are you going to stop some of the run plays that are coming at you in your base defense down there? Like, why are we not in, a bigger package against a bigger team? Why are we doing something different? You know what I mean? We only have a shorter distance to cover. Like, it's a different game. You don't have to defend the 40-yard throw and all that, and the spacing's different. So why don't you have a different defense? Anyway, but then you're looking back at then what you did. So then there's all your coverage cut-ups, you know what I mean? So all the coverage variations. So last year we probably had, you look at our coverage variations, we ran, 50, there was 50 cut-ups of different coverages, you know what I mean? Well, many of them are the same, but to me, they're subtly different because one guy was different, right? So you're in the solo side, you were man instead of a 1 over 1 high kind of thing. Well, that's still different coverage to me in terms of somebody who was doing something different. So you got all those you want to evaluate. So then you can go through, obviously, with different things and study, obviously, again, the success rate. What was your average yards given up in that defense? So we ran this defense this many times. Man, we only gave up 3.7 yards every time we ran that defense. That's pretty good. And go back on the defenses that weren't good, like one's skewed. Why was it? You know what I mean? Why did this defense give up 9 yards per play? And then you look at it and you're like, well, we really didn't give up 9 yards a play. We gave up 5 yards a play, except for that 59-yarder we gave up against Berry Hard Baylor at the end of the year. So that skewed the average. You know what I mean? So you can't just rely on averages for everything. That's where you go. We've got to go back and, again, watch the video and look at the individual plays of something. And that's where, the whole debate between statistical analysis and data analytics comes into play. Because, like, you still have to feel as a coach, like, what does the film say and what do your players say? Because data will tell you one thing, but that doesn't tell you the X's, the Jimmys and Joes. You know what I mean? The whole thing, your Jimmys and Joes going to be better than X and O's. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't tell you that part. So I try to look at all that. You look at your pressure, like was our pressure that we ran effective or not? You know what I mean? And if it wasn't, why wasn't it? You know what I mean? Did we run it against a badly designed protection? Did the kids run the stunt terrible? Was our timing incorrect? They max protect and we didn't expect it to max protect, and that pressure isn't going to work against max protection. Those type of things that come into play. And then obviously run defense, you just go back and look at obviously all the big run plays you give up. And like we said earlier, we're going to emphasize big run plays. So like there's a cut up of just big plays given up. And that's one that the kids know every year because they usually watch it with them in camp. You know what I mean? Of like, all right, we're saying we don't give up big plays. We're going to watch the big play cut up from last year, and no one wants to be on the big play cut up. You know what I mean? So you're on there at Rover, and you're in the first 10 plays, you're on there 3 times. You know what I mean? Well, if again you go back to personal signature, you're like, man, I was the reason. It was my fault. I sucked 3 times, and I'm on that cut up 3 times. Literally, for some of our kids that are high in that personal signature category, they've told me that was their motivation. Like, they didn't want to be on the big play cut up when we watch it the next year. But I think that's you have to do all that if you want to. When you're the play caller and you're the designer of the defense, like, again, you kind of owe it to your kids to invest in that, to have some knowledge and to try to get better at something, you know what I mean, and to find ways to tweak what you're doing, and to find if you need to scrap something altogether. You know what I mean? For a few years, we had a few things that you looked and was like, man, our success rate was not good when I called that. So why are we running it? It's not. It looks cool, but it's not very good in practicality. So softball is way less, but I asked the kids last year, we made a cut up for them because we use huddle as well. Every at bat they had from the entire season. So 54 game season. So they had every at bat from a 54 game season, and they had to go through and write me a report. So they had to do it as players. What was the most common way you got out? What, in terms of pitch locations and all those type of things, what was the most common thing where you got hits? What are things that you think you can adjust now that you've seen it to help get better to eliminate your outs? You look at a batting average, for example, the goal is to hit 400. The difference between hitting 400 and 300 is, maybe 15 at bats a year. You know what I mean? So what can you, let's say you flew out to center field 30 times last year. What's caused it? Why'd you fly out to center field 30 times? Is there something in your mechanics or something in your pitch selection? If we cut that down from 30 to 15, we just upped your batting average from 300 to 400. You know what I mean? As a player, trying to take that kind of, again, statistical analysis and awareness. And some kids are great at that, and some kids they're brutal. You know what I mean? But at least you get them to think about it.
If you were in my shoes right now, and you're interviewing John Wooden, what question are you asking John Wooden? I'm sure you got a couple, but what is dang, I really want to fucking know what's going on in his mind. I'm asking him this question.
I think a lot of the questions you asked are great. You know what I mean? I think you're trying to ask. I think you want to ask more the nuts and bolts and the day-to-day stuff. You know what I mean? Because I think philosophy questions are great, but that's the one thing when I used to go to clinics when I was younger, I was like, this is stupid. I'm not learning anything, because most of the coaches don't want to share anything because they don't want to give away anything. So they're just talking about their general philosophy, you know what I mean? And then, you get a question from the audience. I remember listening to Steve Spurrier when I was younger, when he was had a role in at Florida, and and I've had this from several Division I guys, and somebody asked him a higher level scheme question, you know what I mean? And he's like, well, you just get a better kid. If that doesn't work, you just need to recruit a better kid. And a lot of us are D3 high school coaches are like, that is not an option. So what do we do when we can't go get a better kid? You know what I mean? But for them, a lot of times that's the answer. If that doesn't work, you need a better kid. But I think those process questions is what I would ask. What is, what if it was? It's a little bit harder for me because he's basketball, but you know what I mean. But if I was a basketball coach, tell me what a daily practice looks like for you. How do you design your practices on a daily basis? What are you doing, like you said, when things aren't going really well? How do you really integrate the freshmen into your program? What do you do from a team standpoint to really build that team culture? What are some specific things you do with your team that really you think have made a big impression on helping with team culture? What do you do?
I said one.
Have the kid.
I said one.
Sorry. So
you gave me no, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to take about 3 of those that you just said. I was hoping that you had one in your head and I'd be like, okay, you have to answer your own question just now. but I am interested, just like you just said, what does your daily practice look like with softball, with football? How do you go about it? Or let's just go football, okay? Give me the weekly breakdown, the scouting report, and then how it's implemented at practice. I mean, I kind of understand it because I was through it, but
yeah,
for someone else who's listening.
To be honest, it's really hard, and I'm not crying a river here, but our staff, as you know, has changed a lot at Linfield, and I am on my own a little bit at times in terms of experience in the staff, and I do it to myself because I feel like I know the other team really, really well and can call the game really, really well if I'm the one who does a lot of the work ahead of time. Kind of like going back to the book. If I'm the one that read the book and highlight the book and take the note, I have the kind of memory, I'll remember it, you know what I mean, for the most part. If someone tells it to me, I'm not going to remember it as good, you know what I mean? Even if they did a great job on the report and it's you coming to me and saying, hey, these guys really like to run draw on third down. Like, okay, that one's easy enough. I'll probably remember it. But if it's more specific, you know what I mean, to things like I might not remember it as well. And I think getting the feel for how like the coordinator on the other side likes to call the game. You know what I mean? What does their flow like? When they get stuffed on first down on run, like this guy, he gives up quick. He goes right to pass. You know what I mean? And so like last year, I laughed with our staff because we have a defense that we call a lot in passing downs coverage wise, and it's not very good against the run. Well, last year I called it 77 times, and we called it against 71 passes and 6 runs. So that means I guessed right a lot. You know what I mean? So I felt like they were going to pass, and sometimes it's easy. It's 3rd and 15, but like there's a lot of times you're calling it in 2nd and 6 or 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and your gut just tells you these guys aren't going to run the ball right now. You know what I mean? And so you get some of that feel, you know, by just making sure you're watching a lot of film and how you do things and how they want to break stuff down. But you go back to defending the run, right? So I think you really get a feel for how to defend run plays in particular when you're the one over the years has drawn up a lot of run plays. You know what I mean? You listen to all the Belichick disciples, like Belichick was huge on making all the young coaches go back and draw everything. You know what I mean? Like the old school days, that instead of using just that, they had to go back and draw everything. And I think there's great value in that as a young coach because you learn how things fit. And the game is a game of angles. The game is a game of, you know, numbers. Like it's really is a game of numbers. Like the offense a lot of times is trying to outnumber you or get your numbers in space, or they run a counter. They're trying to create an extra gap to a side. And so it comes down on defense. How do you equate numbers? You know what I mean? If you can't equate numbers, you really are putting yourself at a disadvantage because they have more numbers than you do, right? So your guys better be way better because they got more numbers to you on this side of the ball than you do. So doing that has been a big part for me in terms of trying to get good at making sure we aren't bad that way. So I watch a lot of film. So I do our own scouting report, and I do it all. So the guys go through for me, and they label things like formations and generally try to name the plays, but I usually have to rename most of them the way that I specifically want them named. And then I make the report. So I watch film and get everything done on Sunday. Hopefully by Sunday night, I'm making my scouting report, and then by Monday morning, I'm finishing it because I need to get it to the players by Monday meeting. So we get it to them a Monday meeting. It's usually, depending on the time of year, it's 10 to 14 pages long. It has every formation, every back set, run pass tendencies, motion tendencies, other things that we pick up tendency-wise in the report. Give it to them, and then from there, the other goal is to obviously get ready for Monday practice. For us, we have a practice on Monday. It's half pads, but it's usually got 2 longer team periods in it. So you're trying to run all the basic plays the other team has and get used to kind of their basic run plays and pass plays. So I got enough run plays drawn up that I'm ready for that and pass plays. So that's got to get done before Monday. Some stabs I've had a pass coordinator that draws up the pass plays. If I don't have that, I'm drawing up every pass play and every run play. So I draw up every single play I want to run. Again, for me, I'm going to pick what we run anyway. So I got to make sure what I think is either challenging for us to defend or what they run a lot. Then those are things you want to run the most. And so I make sure those get drawn and done. Run plays are obviously harder because you got to draw up the front. You want them because you don't want the scout team to F them up. So if you want to change from this front to this front, then you got to drop a new play or whatever just because you can't, the scout team screw it up. And then you got to script it all. And that's the thing that probably takes me the longest on Tuesday, Wednesday is we're going to get off, you know, at Linfield, we try to run over 100 plays a day. I know we go to, you know, an Oregon State practice and we laugh and they got 2 15-minute team periods and man, they got off, you know, whatever, 40 plays, you know what I mean? They're like, well, we're not even halfway through practice yet with what we're getting through team-wise. And it's just different. I think we're pretty scheme-oriented in terms of our success. And then 2, we're developing players. We're not already given guys who know how to play at a really high level. So how we develop them is they get a lot of freaking reps, right? So that's one way you get better. Like you have to play a lot of football. The difference between a senior and a freshman is not always the athleticism. It's they know how to play football and they know how to read and they know how to anticipate things. Like, well, you don't get that without reps. And so that's one thing we believed in big is getting a lot of reps. Well, that then goes to the coaches. Like I have to have 120 plays ready to go if that's how many plays we're going to run. So that's Tuesday and Wednesday we go. And I think I've read from a couple coaches before and it kind of hit with me. Your goal every day is to make that practice the best possible practice you can. And you just treat it like that's the only practice you got. You don't worry about the next practice. Like, can we have an awesome practice today? And then that gets thrown away. And then tomorrow the job is to make that practice the next best practice you can get. And so if you kind of take that approach, and that's hard, like there's days where I'm tired as hell. There's been days in softball, like I'm busy with like softball recruiting stuff or recruiting stuff in general. And like I'm busy and all of a sudden I look at my watch and I got an hour to get to practice or half hour. Like, can I really sit down and plan a great practice? Or do I go back and just rely on 20 years of experience and know I'll throw something together that's good, but was it as good if I maybe spent some time and actually thought about some different ways to do things or maybe change practice up today or do whatever. So, but if you can take the time to really just sit back and think about how we make practice great today, it would be great. But anyway, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are our harder work days. We kind of meet an hour before practice, and then we practice for essentially 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 40 minutes. Done. Guys go home. That's the thing that's different for us now is we go home. Now you don't see me in my office at 1 o'clock. I'll be at home working till 1 o'clock instead, but I'll still be doing it. So I go home and I eat dinner with my family and I put my kids to bed and hang out a little bit. And then my wife's a school teacher, so they go to bed pretty early, 9 o'clock. So then I go back in and start grinding. And our way to get on the same page is I go through the day's practice. So I go through and have a practice cut up made of pretty much every play from yesterday, that day's practice. I watch the entire practice, but I make a screen recording and I make it like we're sitting in a meeting. So it's me and all the DBs and all the linebackers, and we're in a meeting together. And here's me, the coordinator, going through the whole practice. And okay, here's what we did well. Here's what we didn't. I don't like this. I don't like that. This is awesome. We did this great, blah, blah. But then that allows all of our coaches to watch it before the next day. And then all of our players that are, I would say, motivated and into that part of it, then they can watch it as well. And so that helps a ton with getting our kids and me on the same page without having to physically meet. And especially we're trying to prioritize some family time and stuff where we're going to come back and all of the coaches be in the office and away from family during that critical kind of dinner bedtime, or I let them all go. And we have a couple coaches that commute. So like, am I going to make them stay here till 10 so they can commute home and get home at 11 and then go to their regular job during the day and then come coach at Linfield? Like, that doesn't work. So that's kind of how the typical week works. I do that in the middle of the week. Then we obviously lighten up at the end of the week, but we're still running a lot of plays.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember those days. 100, 120. I remember when we were down on scout team my freshman year, it was about the same. And just when we were corners, it was me, Belcher, and who was it? Me, Belcher, Josh Cole. Can't even remember, but panned out for Belcher and I to get all those freaking reps down there.
Yeah,
definitely panned out. Well, shoot, Coach, man, I don't want to take any more of your time, and got to go back and enjoy this little vacation what we got with our family. But is there any thoughts to kind of conclude everything? Any imparting wisdom that you care to share before we get off for the good of the community?
No, part of a lot of I answered whatever you wanted me to.
I